Good day, everyone, especially Ma'am Branya. Have a good day to you, Ma'am. First, we want to introduce ourselves. My name is Desiree Swanzeline R.
I'm Maulion Angelo E.
My name is Jan Eric de Mabelta.
I'm Charmaine Kinya.
The topic that Ma'am Branya gave to me and with my groupmates is all about perjury. And the lesson under the topic perjury are perjury in general, erasures, alterations, obliteration of documents, and additions, interlineations, and substitution in documents, anonymous writing, and lastly, standards of comparison. Chapter 3, Unit 1, Perjury in General. Forgery is the action of forging or producing a copy of a document, signature, banknote, of work of art, o yung tinatawag natin siyang falsification. According to Webster, forgery defines a signature as one's name written by him on a document as a sign of acknowledgement. And according to criminal law, perjury is a fraudulently altering a written document or seal with the intent of injuring the interests of another person or of fraudulently obtaining governmental revenue. Forgery is the act of falsely making or materially altering with intent to defraud and writing which, if genuine, might be of legal efficacy or the foundation of a legal liability. Most writers have at least three classes of signatures. First, the formal, complete, correct signature for an important such as a will. Second, the informal, cursory signature for routine documents and personal correspondence. And third, the careless scribble for the mail courier, delivery boy, and perchance the autograph collector. Forgeries must be executed with such skill or in such circumstances that they would be mistaken for genuine documents by the average person. To imitate the handwriting of another or the form of the simulated document is not necessarily attempted. If the intention was to deceive and the circumstances were such as to render deception possible, then the crime has been committed. Consequently, perjury includes signing the name of a person who cannot write. Any material alteration, however, is slight as just as the unauthorized use of another's signature is as much a perjury as is transferring a genuine signature to a document for which it was not intended, or the fabrication of an entire document. Ang offense ay hindi lamang limited to the fabrication of writing but includes the fabrication of printed or engraved instruments tulad na lamang ng railway and airplane tickets, stock certificates, and bonds. Moreover, the false document must have an apparent legal efficacy. A letter of introduction, although requesting a personal favor for the bearer from the one to whom it is addressed, is not a subject of a criminal forgery. To secure a conviction of perjury, it is necessary to prove intent to defraud, but not that the purpose should have been actually effected. It is sufficient to show that the forgery would have proved injurious to another's interest had it got ahead. Two definitions of signature. The first one is the all definition. All definition is the name of any person written with his own hand in a document as a sign of acknowledgement, or within this old definition, a personalized signature is not accepted. For example is ako, Yung mismong pangalan ko ang sinulat ko as a sign of my signature. And ito yung tinatawag na all definition of signature. While the second one is the new definition. New definition refers to any design or pattern written by a person in a document as a representation of acknowledgement, or ito yung tinatawag na mismong perma ng isang tao. Or this definition accepts both the personalized and the conventional type of signature. Kinds of signature. The first one is the conventional or ordinary copy, book form, meaning the letters are legible, or ibig sabihin, the letters are clear enough to read or readable. The second one is the highly individualized or personalized, meaning characterized by a series of intertwining stroke, ornamentation, and flourishes. Ibig sabihin, ito yung signature na ginagamitan ng cursive. Signature is not a signature, but it is a drawing. Difference between signatures of a subject and extended writings. Extended writings are any writing by an individual other than their own signature or initial. Signature are just that the name of a person or something representing his or her name. Signatures of an individual may become stylized over time because the person tends to write his or her name over and over. Therefore, often it is not possible to use the extended writing of a person to identify a signature of that individual. To identify question signature, it is best to have contemporaneous signatures of the subject for comparison. Classification of suspect signatures. In suspect documents, Harrison lists 7 general classifications of suspect signatures. These are: first, forged signature where no attempt has been made to make a copy of the genuine signature of the person purporting to assign the documents. Second, forged signatures of fictitious person. Third, forged signatures which closely resemble the genuine signature since they had been produced by a tracing process. The fourth, forged signature which resemble the genuine signature written freehand to produce what is known as a simulated forgery. The fifth one, genuine signatures which had been obtained by trickery. The sixth one, genuine signatures which the writer are honestly unwilling to accept as genuine. And the last, number 7, genuine signatures which have been deliberately written illegibly or in unusual manner so as to afford the signatories some plausible grounds for disclaiming them should they deem it expedient. A very small percentage of signatures in existence are forgeries, but since these are generally part of important documents or of papers which carry a monetary value, their detection is an absolute necessity. The qualities of a forgery must be understood before a signature can be accurately identified. Next is primary signs of forgery. The primary signs of forgery are: first, written at speed which is markedly slower than the genuine signatures. The second one, frequent change of the grams of the pen or pencil. Third, blunt line endings and beginnings. The fourth one, poor line quality with wavering and tremor of the line. The fifth one, retracing and patching. The sixth one, stops in places where writing should be free. Number 7, unnatural pen leaf. Number 8, uncertainly tremor. Number 9, drawing quality devoid of pre-normal movement, and lastly, hesitation. Besides the primary of forgery, it is also worth keeping in mind the following three features of forged signatures. First, any forgery will, of necessity, exhibit a considerable degree of similarity to the general run of genuine signatures in the more obvious features of letter design. Second, some forgeries will resemble at least one genuine signature in almost every detail. And lastly, number 3, no two genuine signatures of any length are replicas of each other. If any of the signs of forgery are present in the disputed signature, then the probabilities may be in favor of that signature being a forgery, particularly if the genuine signatures show carelessness, inattention to detail freedom, and speed, and provided there are no external influences present, such as poor writing material or ill health, which could reasonably account for the divergence in a disputed signature. Indicators of forgery. General indications of non-genuineness may include the following: blank starts and stop. The forger places the pinpoint in contact with the paper and starts writing. When he is finished with the name or some portions thereof, he stops the pen and lifts it from the surface. So, ito yung example ng blank starts and stop. And ito yung tinatawag din na blank ending or beginning. Pen leaps and hesitation. This is occasion when the pen stops at an unusual point in the writing, perhaps where a radical change in direction is about to take place or a new letter formation is about to start. This may take the appearance of a small gap, the written line where one is not expected, or an overlapping of two ink lines where there should be only continuous line. Next is tremor. Tremor, because the creation of most forms of non-genuine signatures are little more than drawings. The pen is moving so slowly that small, almost microscopic changes in direction takes place in what should be a fluid-looking line. So, here's the example of tremor. And sabi nga dito, the resultant line is not smooth, but reflects the shaking pen. Kita nyo naman sa pictures na yung sulat niya talaga is shaking. Speed and pressure. Again, because the pen is moving slowly rather than with the dynamic movement associated with most genuine writings. The ink line remains constant thickness resulting from the same constant pressure exerted on the slowly moving pen. There will be little, any, tapering of internal lines. Next is patching. Patching is infrequently, but at one time or another, most of us have made an error while writing our own signature. Some individuals may leave the signature alone, hearing about the mistake or imperfection, while others will simply fix the signature by correcting the offending portion. This may be done in order to make the signature more readable or because a defect in the pen or paper has affected what we perceive to be our normal signature, or for some other reason that may even be subconscious. These fixes are usually patent, with no attempt made on the part of the signer to mask or otherwise hide the correction. These signature corrections are quite different than patching that is frequently found in non-genuine signatures. Indications of genuineness. Number 1 is habitual speed of writing. Number 2, firmness of stroke. Third, degree of skill. Number 4, pattern of shading and emphasis. Number 5, fundamental muscular movement. And lastly, coordination, continuity, and freedom. Kinds of perjury. Number 1 is the simple perjury or spurious perjury. Simple perjury is defined as the fraudulent writing of the signature of another in the natural or disguised writing of the perjurer, the latter exerting no effort to effect a resemblance between the perjury and the genuine signature of the individual whose signature is being forged. So, ito yung example ng simple perjury. Nang ibig sabihin nito, si simple perjury is the easiest type to identify because malalaman mo agad na perjury ito dahil si genuine at si perjury ay hindi magkahawig. Number 2, simulated forgery is freehand drawings in imitation of a model signature. There are two basic classes of simulation. The most common involves the use of an actual model document. This model is placed near the document to be forged, and the forger copies with pen or pencil his conception of the form of the genuine signature model in the manner of the artist sketching from a live model. Ibig sabihin nito, one made by copying a genuine signature. A second class of perjury by simulation finds the perjurer without an actual model document at hand. The forger must rely for inspiration on his recollection from past observation of the genuine signature he intends to imitate. If such a forger has a unique photographic memory, he may be able to compose a simulation from his mental image about as readily as if he was copying from an actual model signature. Number 3 is trace perjury. Trace forgery is the result of an attempt to transfer to a fraudulent document an exact facsimile of a genuine writing by same tracing process. Trace perjury. In this type, the writer traces over a signature or other writing because the writer does not write in his or her natural hand. It is not possible to identify the writer, but it is possible to determine if the writing was produced by tracing. So, yung tracing, ito yung binabakat. Number 4, cut and paste perjury. Cut and paste perjury is created when the authentic signatures are misused by means of photocopiers or computer scanners. Your true signature is copied from a document you actually signed, but then that copied signature is placed into a different document you have never seen before. In these situations, the resulting signature is not really a forgery, strictly speaking, because your signature has just been recycled. However, we will still call it a forgery for our purposes since this situation represents an unauthorized use of your true signature to fraudulent ends. This method of perjury is becoming more prevalent in today's high-tech age with the advancements in quality of computer scanners and photocopy machines. Kinds of tracing process. Number 1 is carbon process. Here, the forger places the document to be forged on the bottom, interleaves a piece of carbon paper, and places on top a document containing a genuine signature. The forger then traces over the genuine signature with a pencil, pen, styles, or other sharp-pointed instrument. Even a strong toothpick, a paper clip, or hairpin can be employed. The pressure of this over-tracing against the carbon paper imprints the signature outlined in carbon on the bottom document. Examination of the use of carbon paper or carbon film ribbon can sometimes disclose the content of the text. Number 2, indentation process. The document containing the authentic signature is placed on top of the document being forged. The forger traces, usually with considerable pressure, over the genuine signature using a pencil, pen, stylus, or similar instrument and creates an indented signature outline on the document being forged. So, ibig sabihin, indented writing or second page writing is the impression from the writing instrument captured on sheets of paper below the one that contains the original writing. This often manifests itself when pads of paper are used or in some record-keeping situations. So, ibig sabihin pa rin ito, the indentations may be made visible by rubbing with a crayon or the side of a pencil. However, it is a destructive process not used by forensic document examiners. Number 3, transmitted light process. The document to be purged is placed on top of the document containing the genuine signature. In registration, the two documents are superimposed over a light source and a flat surface. The ever-available window, a photographic printer, or the draftsman's purchasing ease might be utilized. The forger traces a signature outline with pencil or pen and ink, following the design of the genuine signature made visible by the light in the back of it. Among trademark of this manner of tracing are sluggish, unnatural execution, heavy and irregular pressure, blunt ending stroke, a lack of rhythm, and uncertainty. Identity of forgers. While it is often possible to express and justify a definite opinion as to whether a signature is genuine or forged, it is rare that the identity of a forger can be established. As forgery involves a double process on the part of the forger by discarding all his own writing habits and at the same time adopting the unfamiliar characteristics of another person's writing, the forger remains anonymous. Sex of writer. Contrary to common belief, there is no known reliable method of determining the sex of the writer from an examination of the handwriting. Ibig sabihin, walang reliable method dahil mahirap talagang i-determine ang sulat ng lalaki at ang sulat ng babae.
Art forgery. A forged petition, the forging of artworks for financial gain, continues to be practiced. Here, an Italian policeman holds a fake Titian painting, one of hundreds of paintings, etchings, and statues confiscated from forgery ring that operated in Italy in 1990s. By the use of special illumination such as ultraviolet, black light, infrared photography, X-ray, radiograph, inconsistencies, and change in painting may be detected. Instrumental analysis may be reveal anachronisms in work of art and techniques such as carbon-14 dating, thermoluminescence dating, and dendrochronology or pre-rain dating are helpful in detecting forgeries in work art. The dates when many pigments were introduced into the artist's palette are also known. Thus, if the 18th century pigments Russian blue and zinc white appear in a painting purported to be an early date, then the work is obviously a forgery. Paint extending over an old crackle pattern may be further evidence of repainting. Signatures are often changed by a forger. Frequently, the binocular microscope is used to detect the alteration. Radiographs will reveal change made by the original artist as well as those made on an old object by forger. Pottery from archaeological site is often restored from pieces that not belong together by filling down age of similar pieces from a second object. These and plugs of plaster or the other materials may show up on the X-ray. The best detector of a false work of art, however, is the trained human eye. For example, a banker who is thoroughly familiar with printed currency may be able to detect counterfeit money just by casual scrutiny, in the same way that a fraudulent signature on a cheque is glaringly obvious when compared with a true signature. The detection of forgeries should be carried out jointly by an historians, art conservators, and restorers and scientists who have specialized in analysis of art and archaeological materials. Art forgery. QDE or Question Document Examination has been a profession at least since 1870. It frequently is found in case of forgery, counterfeiting, mail fraud, kidnapping, coin game, embezzlement, gambling, organized crime, white-collar crime, art crime, theft, robbery, arson, burglary, homicide, serial murder, psychological profiling, and deviant sex crime. A number of famous cases over the years, some involving wrong conviction. The diffuse affair, Bruno Hauptmann and Nürnberg kidnapping, the Hitler diary, profiling controversy, and Clifford Irving forgery of Howard Hughes' signature and Mormon documents were showcased for talent of various experts at QDE. It is strength
Drone.
from civil law is that expert opinion can overturn eyewitness opinion. Some famous forgers and forgeries. Major George Byron, Lord Byron forgeries, Thomas Chatterton literary forgeries, John Payne Color printed forgeries, Dorman David Texas Deck Independence, Mark Hoffman Mormon Freemason forgeries, William Henry Ireland Shakespeare forgeries, Clifford Irving Howard Hughes forgery, Conrad Kojak Hitler diaries, James McPherson Ocean manuscript, George Manassar literary forgery, Alexander Howland Smith historian documents, unknown documentary photo Billy the Kid, numerous biblical forgeries. Notable forgers. Throughout history, art forgeries have been made whenever creative works have been considered valuable for collection. The Romans copied original Greek sculptures, and many of copies have at the same time or other themselves have been considered originals. Today, these copies are in museum, valued for what they are. Coins have been counterfeit since they were first minted by King Gyges of Lydia, who died in the 7th century BC. Sometimes, molds were made of originals and copies produced by casting. At other times, original dies were used to strike unauthorized issues. Darius Byzantine Emperor debased the coinage with base of alloys, a form of deception, and coins were even produced in base metal and gilded to be processed of as solid gold. Jane de France, Jude de Berry, an art patron and coin collector, had modern copies made of old Dutch and French coins to fill in gaps in his collection. The Italian artists Giovanni Caveno and Piero Ligorio were master coin counterfeiters of the 16th century. Even the great Michelangelo forged an antique marble copied for the patron. Lorenzo de Medici, in the 18th century, a forger produced a marble headed of Julius Caesar that was purchased by London British Museum in 1818, believing it authentic. Perhaps the most famous true unwritten master forger of all time was Alceo de Siena, who successfully produced sculptures of such high quality that they were accepted as genuine by many art critics, museum director, and famous collector. Apparently, de Siena, as master artist, did not know he was defrauding a third party, merely supplying his work in various styles: art, Greek, Hellenistic, Roman, Gothic, and Renaissance. When he discovered that a Madonna and child has made sold of 50,000 lire was in turn sold for 3 million lire, he stepped forward and proclaimed that the works were modern. Of almost equal notoriety is the story of Hans van Meegeren. He painted a number of fake Weimers and Peters de Hoch that were accepted as genuine by eminent art critics and sold to important collection and museum of fabulous sum. When he was accused of collaborating with the enemy in solving through intermediary Weimers the woman taken in adultery to Hermann Göring during World War II. He was able to prove that Weimar has by his own hand. Van Meegeren has sent to prison for 1 year. In recent years, skillful forgeries of painting of Vincent van Gogh, Paul Cézanne, Picasso, and other modern masters have appeared. Often these are declared fake by art historians frequently after technical examination. Unit 2. Erasure, alteration, obliteration of documents and additions, interlineation, and substitution in documents. Erasure. The changing of documents by removing certain parts is very common. It is not easy to do with chemical inks. Some form of solution must be used to remove it. Examination by transmitted or ultraviolet light will usually show signs of much insured. In the use of mechanical erasure by rubbing, the paper is usually thinner in this place and transmitted light will show it. If investigation suspect chemical erasure, he should submit the document. to the laboratory. The common and clumsy form of erasure is by abrasion, by which method the surface of the paper itself containing the ink is actually removed, taking the ink with it. Erasure of this kind are usually perfect apparent when carefully examined, but may be so skillful made as to escape detection on the first view. The slightness disturbance of the surface of smooth paper, even by an ordinary rubber eraser, can rapidly be detected by holding the sheet so that the angle of reflection from the portion in question is exactly on a line with the eye. The portion disturbed will look darker simply because it will not reflect as much light as the smoother portion of the paper. One interesting topic in forgery is the race, check, draft, or other commercial paper, which made represent a larger sum than when it was signed. This is somewhat usually but very dangerous kind of forgery, as the signature which it carries is genuine, and when a paper is presented for payment or credit, special attention is naturally detected only to the signature. Genuine documents are sometimes so carelessly drawn that the amount is increased simply by adding words before or after the smaller amount first written and then adding chippers to the amount written in figure, or if necessary, changing the amount in figures. If document has been raised by adding to it a word, line, or a figure which has not required an erasure, it may be impossible to show that a change has been made, but the lack of continuity is usually apparent. If the change or addition has, however, touched any previous writing, is usually possible to show a natural order in the writing. A fraudulent addition in words will almost invariably show a different slant, size, line, width, or general unnaturalness that indicates a different time of writing, or as stated, the added part may be written with ink that shows a lack of uniformity with the ink first used. Another form of erasure is use of chemical. Chemical erasure usually affected the document in such a way as to show clearly that it has been tampered with, but when skillfully made, they are not discernible by ordinary observation. All of these chemical preparations have tendency to produce on white paper, after the lapse of some time, a pale yellow stain. Alteration, change or interlineation in a will are especially reprehensible, and if at last moment before execution they must be made, they should be described at the end of the will itself before execution. But this commendable practice is by no means universal, and therefore it frequently becomes necessary, determined, or fraudulent. It is possible that interline or added part may be in different handwriting, then carefully study and comparison must be made. As with a simulated forgery, but often part in dispute is consideredly written by the writer, of remainder of document, and the order, date, and continuity of the writing are the question to be investigated. Alteration can be generally seen with the aid of a good magnifying glass and the help of special lighting. The forgery usually tries to change A1 to A7 or add a 0 behind the number to increase the value by 10. A check or receipt for 7 could be raised to 70 if sufficient space I left in original document. The forgery will also have to change the written 7 to 70 by adding letters T and Y or TY. The investigation should be careful to be ensured that only alteration on a document has not done by writers himself. People often correct mistake in writing at the time they make it. The forgery will usually not have the same pen or ink, and the alteration will be noticeable. Common most error and alteration suspect. First, spelling, punctuation, paragraphing, numbers, incorrect use of words, capital division of words, title, incorrect abbreviation, incorrect address. Careful attention should be given to sentence construction, spelling, grammar, idiom, division of words, shading, space, system of writing, title, erasures, use of capital letters, abbreviation, stamping, superscription, symbol written simply above the letter, proportion of letters, alignment, margin, watermarks, connections, punctuations, underscoring, folding, ink. Alteration in typewriting document. Questions sometimes arise concerning suspected addition to a typewriting document. If an erasure and misaligned addition are present, the problem is not difficult. If the addition has been made with great skill, a close examination by means of measure device and low power microscope is necessary. The following produced will be found practice. A. Machine. The examiner may be determined whether the addition has made by the same machine or some make and model of typewriter. The success of this examination will depend on the amount of typing in the added text, ink density. If manuscript text has part of original text, no difference in the density of ink impression should be observed. Since a similar part of the ribbon has used, the examiner will examine the addition under microscope and compare the ink with that of accepted part of the text. Alignment. It is difficult to replace a sheet of paper in typewriter and perfectly align added letters with those previously made. The examiner tests the suspected additions of alignment by means of a glass plate, and it can readily be determined whether a given letter is falling in its proper place. Obliteration. Sometimes forger spill ink on the document to hide part he does not want to be seen. He tries to make this look accidental. Examination by the investigator with a magnifying glass will usually show that obliteration happens in only a very important part of a document. Obliteration by ink can uncover by laboratory with infrared photography or ultraviolet light. If the obliteration is done with color ink, in his photographic depth, he should look at the document with different filter to see if he can read the writing. However, water soaking often liberates older fluid-based ink. Usually, the ink can contain some sort fluorescent indicator. Common means of restoration provide limit result. Certain stain, however, can removed by carefully applying reagents or through specialized photographic technique. If chemical treatment of document is anticipated, contact a qualified chemist for any efforts. Alteration, obliteration, ink examination. Often an alteration or obliteration may be discovered and deciphered, or an ink differentiation determined by the document examiner. The obvious and discernible evidence of a second writing instrument may well prove that an addition or fact has taken place. In addition to a naked eye or a low magnification visual examination of the question materials, an examination may also incorporate the use of selective color filters or colors filter combination. This could be method of choice for instance in the examination of obscured blood-stained document. Although at times this visual examination reveals evidence leading to definitive opinion. Usually, a more truly examination is necessary. Viewing by stereo microscope may reveal subtle difference with the question materials such as light change in shading or hue. Secondary lines indicated at alteration when present are usually discovered during this process. More in-depth examination of the question document using selective portion of the light spectrum can be accomplished, known as video spectral comparison or DSC, or by chemical analysis of the ink TLC. BSC, infrared imaging equipment and infrared photography have opened up a new world for the question document examiner. Although the concept is not new, every day we read about development of new spy satellite that employs infrared imaging. Snooper, scope, and infrared binocular have been used for decades. How do this process work? The human eye perceives color as reflection of a portion of the light spectrum. When we observe somebody wearing a red shirt, the chemical composition of the dyes in the shirt materials has absorbed the entire visible light spectrum, with exception of that portion that we have come to interpret a red. However, just as we are aware that a dog is in dog, with the ability to hear as much wider spectrum of frequencies than the human ear is capable of hearing. We should be aware that there is much more to color spectrum than what we are capable to perceiving with the unaided eye. Every time we see a rainbow, we observe a graphic display of visual portion of the light spectrum. The rainbow of colors that we observe from red to blue does not, however, define limits of portion of electromagnetic spectrum that was being defined as colors. There is any area on either side of that rainbow that we cannot observe. These areas are ultraviolet or UV and infrared or IR. Although we are not able to see in the infrared or ultraviolet regions of the light spectrum, with the naked eye, we can use instrumentation to convert those wavelengths into visible image. When examining a question document, different inks different inks that appear similar to our aided eye may react quite different when viewed under ultraviolet light or by use of infrared imaging techniques. Using infrared, inks can be observed to luminance or glow, be transparent or appear unchanged depending upon its chemical properties. The infrared examination may consist of using specialized light, filter or films for photographic imaging or by use of equipment especially designed for infrared imaging. This process is referred to video spectral comparison, and equipment is usually referred to as video spectral comparator or BSC for short.
So, thin layer chromatography or TLC. The TLC process is usually used in conjunction with ink comparison rather than obliteration, and although by nature of destructive test, TLC is the most definitive process. So, yung TLC or thin layer chromatography ay isang things na ginagamit sa pag-examine ng ink o kung anong klaseng ink or kung anong klaseng kulay ang ginamit sa isang document sa paggawa ng letters. So, makikita nyo sa picture, ito ay usually ginagawa sa mga laboratory. So, next is detection and decipherment of obliteration and alteration. The examination is performed in order to protect whether a portion of a document has been altered, some portion not readily visible, or some text added. So, dito sa detection and decipherment of obliteration and alteration, tinitingnan dito kung ano yung portion ng letter or text ang na-obliterate or na-altered. So, ini-examine din dito yung isang document kung meron bang na-altered or hindi masyadong mabasa o di kaya naman ay may na-added na text. So, next is if obliteration and alteration identified, then the method is determined to describe and if is possible text of the obliterated deciphered. So, pag sinabing obliteration, ito yung the action of removing something o pagtatanggal ng mga nakasulat or nakalagay sa isang letter. And pag naman alteration, ito yung the act of revising, changing something in the letter or document. So, tinatanggal o kaya binabago naman yung mga nakasulat sa isang document or letter. Next is instruments such as video spectral comparator or VSC allows the examiner to examine the document through infrared sensitive CCD camera. as a detector. The image is examined by viewing on a monitor and the digital image processing through the computer. This is useful in ink differentiation. So, yung video spectral comparator, kung makikita nyo sa image, ito yung instrument na ginagamit sa pagdetect ng isang letter o document. So, nilalagay yung letter dun sa instrument and then lalabas yung letter na mas malinaw dun sa monitor. So, dun mas makikita kung anong klaseng letter or kung anong klaseng ink ang ginamit doon sa isang document. So, mas makikita na mas malinaw doon kapag ginamit yung VSC or yung video spectral comparator. Next is ink line stray, another method for differentiating between different writing implement usually limited to the ballpoint pen is by microscopic observation of the stray of ladder of leaf in the ink line by imperfection in the ball or ball housing of the writing pen. So dito naman sa ink line stray, ginagamitan ito ng microscopic observation dahil dinidetermine kung anong klaseng ink ang ginamit sa isang letter o document at tinitignan din kung meron bang mali doon sa ink line at sa paggamit ng ballpen. And next is anonymous writing. Possesses a particular problem to the detective decision. The writing may be a harmless crime, a sexual psychopath, an extortionist, or simply a troublemaker. The last mentioned is the most deceitful of this type of offender. With a few lines on paper, he can disrupt the harmony of a home, create decision in a business organization, or undermine the structure of an established career. So, dito naman sa anonymous writing, ito yung mga pagsulat ng letter na kung ano-ano ng mga hindi kilalang tao. Kumbaga, mga unknown creator or author. So, next is anonymous note and letter. Make some frustrating cases. The writer will often attempt to disguise his or her handwriting and perhaps take special care not to leave latent print. In many cases, there is no logical suspect. So, dito naman sa anonymous note and letter, so, ito yung mga cases na kung saan mga nagsusulat din ng mga letter na kung ano, no, pero hindi mo ma-determine kung sino agad ang mga nagsulat nito dahil wala kang makikita ang halos naiwan ng mga Latin print sa kanyang ginawang letter. Next is type of anonymous letter. There are 4 convenient categories may be used in include the person with information, the person with criminal intent, the malcontent, and the crank. Next is A, information. Under the A, information is A.1, reliable informer. A person may write to the police department to inform them to identity of a criminal. Sometimes the tip will be reliable one. A person witnessing a crime or knowing of the existence of a conspiracy will, out of the public spirit or out of person dislike for the criminal, inform the authorities of the circumstances surrounding the crime. So, dito naman sa reliable information, ito naman yung mga tao na napagkakatiwalaan na nagbibigay ng tips sa isang police officer na kung saan sa pamamagitan ng letter nagbibigay sila ng mga reliable source sa isang krimen na nangyayari. So, yun yung reliable information. Next is crank informants. The writer will usually be observed by some imaginary terror and will accuse it of the most heinous crime, including the one under decision. The language of accusation is approximately will can be readily recognized and profitability ignored. Next is B. Criminal intent. The writer usually demands a sum of money. Alternatively, the receiver of the letter must accept the punishment which is rated. So, ang criminal intent, ito yung mga writer na nagdi-demand ng kanilang kagustuhan na kung saan pinapadala doon sa kanilang victim na magbigay nito o magpadala ng ganito dahil kung hindi ay sasaktan sila o di kaya ay magbibigay ng threat sa kanilang buhay. Next is kidnapping. The criminal may threaten to kill the captive unless arrange sum of money is delivered under stated condition. Wealthy persons are the usual receiver of such letter. The better history of such cases point to the advisability of immediately referring them to the police. So, dito naman sa kidnapping, ito naman yung mga halimbawa ng mga message na o message o mga letter na dadating sa isang victim na halimbawa ay message na papatayin sila o magbibigay ng threats kung hindi magbibigay ng ganitong halaga. So, kung halimbawa may ganong nangyayari sa isang victim ay agad ipagbigay alam sa mga pulis para mabigyan agad ito ng action. So, next is extortion and blackmail. Blackmail is a form of extortion. In committing the crime of extortion, the criminal obtains property from another with his consent, induced by the use of force or fear. The blackmail sent or causes to be sent for the purpose of extorting money. A letter of writing such threatens one of the following: A. To accuse a person of a crime. B. To do any injury to any person or property. C. To publish or congive at publishing a libel. D. To expose or input a deformity or disgrace. O dito naman sa extortion and blackmail, ito yung mga pangingikil o pananakot para magbigay ng kung ano-ano. So, yun yung extortion. Next is malcontent. This is the most common types of anonymous letter writers. In some communities, this action is called dropping a letter. So, yung malcontent, siya yung usually common na ginagamit na anonymous letter. So, mas tinatawag siya na dropping a letter. And next is cranks. So, these terms cover a wide range of letter writers. Some of them are harmlessly insane and can be ignored. Others may give violent vent to their feelings and are potentially dangerous. So, yun yung cranks. So, next is under the cranks, D.1, attacking public figures. The writer is either religious or political crank. He address anonymous letter to person in public office at the head of the large private organization. So, dito sa attacking of public figures, mostly, ang mga gumagawa nito ay yung mga religious or political crank. They are attack social, political, or influencer in a large private organization. Commonly, ang mga gumagawa nito ay ang mga yung may mga psychiatric disorder. At ang mga victim nila ay ang mga political at iba pa. So, kaya ginagawa nila ito yung mga pag-attack sa mga public officer or sa mga religious ay minsan dahil revenge o di ka naman ay personal matter lang. So, next is D.2. Obscene letter, the sex debate. Some person derive great satisfaction, usually sexual in nature, from writing obscene or seriously letter to a person of the opposite sex. A neighborhood youth may select a physically well-endowed with girl for his epistolary attention and send her anonymous letter informing her of his sexual ambition. An office worker may send letter to the lady who sat two desks away. Characteristic of this letter is the description of abnormal sexual activity. So, dito naman sa obscene letter to sex, obscene letter, the sex debate, some version dito naman ay commonly mga disgusting letters, yung mga connected siya sa lust or sex. So, nakapaloob sa letter na yon yung mga kagustuhan na makita o gawin nung isang nagawa ng letter. So, next is identifying the writer. In cases involving a complainant, the identity of the author may sometimes be established. If he is writing a series of letters and he is writing in the circle of the complainant, association, acquaintances, or neighbors are or more of the following method may be used. So next is the following method on identifying the writer. A. Fingerprint. The victim should be instructed to submit each suspected letter and open so that it may be processed for fingerprint. So, isang method sa pag-identify ng writer sa isang letter ay yung mga fingerprint. So, sa pamamagitan ng fingerprint, pwede ma-recognize o malaman kung sinong gumawa ng letter na yun. B. Handwriting. Often a generous sample of the culprit handwriting is present. Occasionally, he resorts to hand printing or pasting together of word cut from newspaper headline. So, yun yung handwriting. C. Typewriting. If a typewriting is used, the make of model of the machine can be determined from the anonymous letter of the search can be limited to the office of quarters containing similarities typewriters. In this way, it may be possible to identify the individual typewriter and the person using the machine. So, isa din sa pag-identify ng writer ay yung typewriting. Sa pamamagitan ng typewriting, pwede ma-identify kung sino bang gumawa ng letter na yon dahil gumamit siya ng typewriting machine. So, D is paper and ink. The writer materials in general should be examined from particularities which should serve to identify the source. So yun yung paper and ink. So, E. Plants. If one of the more suspect have been identified, the investigator may be obtained conclusive evidence by means of plant. The use of marked stationery and ink is recommended. If the type of stationery used in the anonymous letter is fairly common or in general supply from the common source, the investigator can be arranged to place a small identifying number in fluorescent ink on a corner of each sheet of stationery. So, yun yung plants. Next is 3 main phases of investigation of anonymous letters. So, meron 3 phases sa pag-iimbestiga ng mga anonymous letters. So, first is careful listing of all probable and possible writers. 2. Study the content of message in the letters. 3. Comparison of the writing of virus suspected writers with the anonymous letter. And next is careful attention should be given to. So, merong mga pagkakataon na dapat binibigyan natin ng pansin kapag nag-check tayo o nag-i-examine ng mga letters. So, first is grammar. So, dapat tinitignan din natin yung mga grammar. 2. Spelling. 3. Division of word. 4. Underscoring. 5. Alignment. 6. Use of capital letters. 7. Margin. 8. Correction. 9. Erasure. 10. Portion of letters. And 11. Shading. And etc. So, yun yung mga careful attention na bibigyan natin ng pansin kapag mag-check tayo ng mga letters.
Unit 4, Standards of Comparison, Handwriting Standards. Throughout the forensic laboratory, there are standard and standards. Standard, ito yung ginagamit sa pagkukumpara sa ibang bagay since it's unknown pero kaya namang mapatunayan. While the standards, ito naman yung kinakailangan sa typewriter, printer, photocopy, and other non-handwriting examinations. So, handwriting standards are frequently referred to as an exemplar's specimen or known. A brief history. Before 1880, sinasabi ng mga eksperto yung kanilang pananaw ukol sa document kung paanong malalaman sa isang document kung ito ba ay totoo or hindi, pineke o ginaya lamang. Standards specifically introduced for comparison were not allowed. Finally, the question of admissibility of handwriting standards was addressed by Federal Statute Title 28, United States Code, Section 1731, where it states that na yung sulat ng sino mang tao ay tanggap para sa purpose ng pagkukumpara at para malaman kung totoo ito o ginaya lamang sa ibang tao. Gilbert v. California in 1967 settled one argument by ruling that a handwriting exemplar is an identifying physical characteristics outside Fifth Amendment provisions against self-incrimination. So it served to protect the innocents who might be ensnared by ambiguous circumstances. Lewis versus United States answered the Sixth Amendment's challenge, that of right to counsel during the taking of exemplars. These are the admissibility of exemplars came by way of Fifth Amendment arguments to having subject provide standard as opposed to those standards already in existence. So, mayroong two groups of standard handwriting. Yung non-request standards and request standards. Ano pag sinabing non-request standards? It's sometimes referred as to gathered or collected. So, dito papasok yung collected or procured na ang specimen ay kinuha sa nakaraang mga sulat kamay ng tao gaya ng past written reaction paper, attendance sheet, or report writing, and etc. So, yung disadvantage nito, ang non-request standard ay mahirap makahanap ng samples that fit the criteria of repeating the format and context of the question writing. Ang advantage naman ng non-request standard is it eliminate any possibility of disguise, often outweighs the possible disadvantage. So, lahat ng mga kalituhan ay mawawala or maiiwasan. Request standards. So, dito naman, it is made upon the request of the investigator. Ang specimen dito ay kinuha upon the request of the investigator to the subject. It means ang specimen ay hinihingi ng investigator sa subject. For example, I am an investigator and Digong is the subject. So, ang gagawin ko ay, pwede ba, Digong, isulat mo nga ito? Therefore, I request him to write something. Ang sulat ni Digong is what we called as requested or procured standard specimen. Next is steps in obtaining dictated request known writings. So, the investigator should be prepared in advance to obtain dictated known request writings exemplars. Obtain collected known non-request writing standards before the dictated writings. Prepare a collection of exemplar forms for the writer to use. So, in the procurement of request standards, yung subject ay dapat nakaupo in a comfortable or natural position. Kagaya ng ibinigay ko kaninang subject, ang subject kanina is si Digong. Kailangan siya yung hihingan ko ng request, siya at should be supplied or babibigyan ng anumang instrumento na gagamitin niya for question writing. If a blank checks are not available, yung blank check slips of paper with corresponding size, yun yung pwedeng gamitin. Blank checks or slips of paper with similar ruled spaces ay maaari ding gamitin if question writings ay nakasulat sa printed lines. So, each specimen should be removed immediately out of his sight while preparing the succeeding one. Yung investigator dapat ay kalmado lang at look unconcerned during the whole proceeding in order to induce naturalness in the writing of the standards. So, if question writings include a street address, municipality, provincial, or city, telephone number, identification number, etc., the subject should be requested to include such particular in his standards. When the issuance of the entire check is alleged, the subject should be supplied with comparable blank checks or of paper of corresponding size with appropriate spacing and rulings. So, yung request standards ay dapat written at several different times during a single interview rather than having them prepared in one continuous writing operation. So, undesirable plan is yung gawing yung question for 10 to 15 minutes at several points in the interview to interrupt the preparation of standards and divert the subject attention temporarily from writing them. So, bakit yun ginagawa? Ang rason ng technique na yun ay para ma-determine yung qualities of personal variations, including the nature and extent. Lahat ng standards ay kinakailangang may sign and date. And the subject state in his handwriting that this handwriting specimen or standards are being given of free will for purposes of examination and comparison. So, the slant, speed, and general appearance of the collected writings as you can determine whether the dictated writings are being written in the normal fashion during the interview. The size, spacing, and placement of the writing may be affected by the size and shape of the document, and the space allowed for the written entry has similar lines, blocks, and space in which to write. Mahalaga ito dahil ang exemplar form ay similar to the question document, so the writer has also similar lines, blocks, and space in which to write. If a lines, blocks, and space in which to write. If a question document was written naman sa tablet paper, stationery, etc., gumamit kayo ng similar paper. If no identical forms are available, forms with similar amount naman and arrangement of writing space yung kailangan or maaaring gamitin. Blank forms can also be hand-drawn as a last result. If you must use a photocopier to duplicate form, sisiguraduhin nyo na magpuproduce kayo ng malinis at puting background sa pagsulat. So, allow the writer to have only exemplar form in front of him or her at a time. For the first few exemplars, kailangan mo daw bigyan yung writer ng minimal instruction and kung kailan magsusulat, magpiprint, or kung kailan capitalize. So, there are few cardinal rules in taking dictated known writings. First one, do not coach the writer on how to make the letters. hindi mo kailangang diktahan ang writer kung paano siya gagawa ng letter forms. And second one, huwag mo ipapakita sa kanya ang question writing. Third one, huwag mo ipapakita sa kanya ang anumang handwriting or even typewriting and tell him or her to copy it. Last is, do not help the subject sa spelling or arrangement. So, yun yung cardinal rules in taking dictated known writings. Tayo sa obtaining known genuine signature specimens. The average problem of signature identification normally requires a minimum of 15 to 20 known genuine signatures for comparison that is unknown or disputed. So, it is equally important for a document examiner to have not only sufficient quantity of known standards for comparison purposes, but also to have right quality of known standards. For example, 50 genuine signatures on a gasoline credit card receipt. Yung masasayang. When used for comparison with a question signed on last will and testament. Kung saan, 5 lang yung totoo signature sa legal document na maaaring mapatunayan. So, it is suggested that when obtaining known comparison signatures, the investigator considered the circumstances listed below in order of importance. One is genuine signatures written nearest in date to the date of the question signatures. Second one is genuine signatures written on similar material like checks, online stationery, similar printed forms, and etc. Genuine signatures written under the same alleged or known circumstances. The last one is genuine writing written with a similar writing instrument. The ballpoint pen, invented by John Loud, consisting of a ball bearing at the point of the pen. Roller, ball pen, and fountain pen. Fountain pen, invented by Lewis Waterman, consisting of pen, nib point, and etc. There are 101 sources of non-request writings, possible source of handwriting for comparison purpose. Dito kasama yung eyewitness writings, admitted writings of or signatures, normal course of business records and legal such as account books, affidavits, assignments, autographs, automobile insurance application, automobile license application, bank deposit slip, bank safe deposits entry slips, books, building, business license applications, checkbook stubs, credit cards, criminal records, deeds of trust, deposition, diaries, dog license application, driver's license and fishing license, marriage record, memoranda of all kinds, military papers, mortgage, newspaper advertise copy, occupational writing, partnership paper, pawn tickets, passport, payroll receipt, pension application, permit application, postal cards, reports, receipt for rent, promissory note, retail store sales slips, school and college papers, timesheets, traffic tickets, and many more. So, factors to be considered in the selection of standard. First one is good writing standards. Kinakailangang sapat para malaman kung tama at kung ano ang pagkakaiba ng handwriting sa anumang kalagayan. Next is, kapag ang question handwriting ay lumabas na hindi maayos, kailangang may pagkukumparahan na isang sitwasyon kung bakit ganun yung nangyayari. Next is, ang nilalaman na dapat ng style of writing in the standard or exemplar ay katulad ng style ng question writings. Kung ito ba ay sulat kamay, ay dapat ganun din. Next is, malalaman mo kung anong instrument ang ginamit kung sa perma ba ay sinulat gamit ang ballpen sa nirolyong papel o sa itaas ng sinulat na pangalan. Ang interval of years sa pagitan ng question and standards ay hindi lalampas ng hinggit sa 5 taon. According to Ordway Hilton, isang authority on the subject of standards, ang pagpili ng standard ay kailangang maingat para ito ay maipaliwanag ng tama at kumpleto kung paanong magsulat ang isang tao. Pero karamihan dito ay magulo at mahirap masolusyonan. Kasama dito ang signature of the careless or highly erratic writer. Dito hindi maingat ang pagsusulat or pagperma, na yung grupo ng writers ay nagsagawa ng signatures na hindi dapat pabago-bago ang perma dahil naguguluhan o nahihirapan silang i-account dahil iba-ibang uri nito na nangyayari kung bakit kine-question ang signature. Next one is the receipt signature, which is almost illegible, may very little relationship to signatures on checks, letters, or legal documents. Ang halimbawa nito ay yung resibo ng bahay, resibo ng mga legal documents, or letters na may signature sa ibaba. Next one is near illiterate writer. So dito ay lack of skills kung saan hindi siya sanay magsulat kaya maraming nagiging mali, na yun ang kadalasang problema dahil sa magulo ang pagkakasulat. Next is the signatures of physical impaired writer. Dito naman is pinagkukumpara yung perma kung ano yung pagkakaiba dahil ito yung magagamit para ma-identify ang isang signature ng tama. Old age deterioration. So makikita natin sa picture na nag-iiba na yung sulat dahil sa paghina ng pangangatawan ng isang tao. Kapag tumatanda na tayo, medyo umiiba na yung way ng ating sulat kamay. Medyo nanginginig na. Nanginginig na yung kamay dala ng katandaan o kaya bata o may sakit na nagiging sanhi ng tremor or shaky strokes. The sick bed signature. It is written on a sick bed represent badly deteriorated signature of a writer who subsequently regains some or all of his writing vigor. So, bigla ang pagpapaperma kung saan siya ay nasa ospital, na aksidente or ooperahan, na kailangan na makaperma. Kaso, ang pinaka-problema dito is, maaaring mabago o maiba yung perma dahil sa sitwasyon na kapag pinagkumpara ay makikita agad yung pagkakaiba. Is disguised signature or writing. The question writing may be disguised that the problem becomes more confusing to the document examiner. So dito, sinusubukan ng writer na manggaya ng sulat ng iba para maitago ang kanyang identity. Kapag yung signature ay iniba, malalaman dito dahil maaari itong makita sa ibang kaparehas na dokumento. At dito malalaman kung ang isang perma ay totoo o hindi. So makikita ang resulta sa pagkukumpara kung ito ay iba ang pumirma o yung mismong writer at makikita ang kaibahan sa way ng pagsulat. Mapapansin nyo, bakit kaya ang petsa ng document ay 2022 subalit 2021 pa lang naman ngayon? Bakit ang sulat ay malabo bagamat ngayon pa lang naisulat? So magkakaroon ng question signature dahil naguguluhan